I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. James Kenyon. Dr. Kenyon, better known as Jimmy, is the director of NASA's Research Center in Cleveland. He's responsible for planning, organizing, and directing the activities required to accomplish the missions assigned to the center. Jimmy received a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech, a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University, and a doctorate in mechanical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University. But I'm sure his most proud accomplishment is being accepted into the Leadership Cleveland class of 2025. His career has included a variety of key leadership roles that have required him to think on his feet, collaborate for forward progress, and embrace failure as a way to learn and advance. We are thrilled to have him join us today. And so without further ado, let me introduce to you Jimmy Kenyon.
Thanks, Angela, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's such a pleasure to be here and speak with you. I know we were scheduled to have a get together a couple of months ago, I think now, and I'll just tell you that about 20 minutes before our scheduled time, I got a meeting popped on my calendar, and then my phone rang, my office phone rang, and it was headquarters saying, "Make sure Jimmy's on that meeting," and so we had to cancel. But if you go back, that was the week of inauguration, and a lot of things changed in and around the federal government pretty quickly. But that being said, I am pleased to join you, and I'm pleased, and I have the privilege of leading a fantastic team at NASA's Glenn Research Center. A question for everybody, and of course, we're not going to do a live poll here or anything like that because I'm not talented enough or knowledgeable enough to know how to do that in Zoom. So we're going to forego that, but just think out loud to yourself. How many of you how many of you know about NASA, what NASA is, what NASA does? You're interested in space exploration or aviation, and you say, "Hey, NASA." But then how many of you, when you think NASA, think of launches going out of Florida, or think of mission control, Houston, we have a problem? But did you know, and how many of you knew, that NASA is actually in Cleveland, Ohio? Cleveland, Ohio is host of one of 10 NASA centers, 10 NASA field centers located around the country. There's only 10 of us, and one of them is right here in our backyard in Cleveland. And it's such a privilege to be here. But let me talk a little bit about what we do at NASA Glenn, because there are 10 NASA field centers. Each of them has its own unique role, its purpose. It's part of our overall NASA mission. What we do at NASA Glenn is what we call propulsion. It's engines, if you will. It's jet engines for airplanes, or if you're a spacecraft, it's a thruster. But we do propulsion. We do power for airplanes and spacecraft. We do communications technologies for airplanes, for spacecraft. And none of those things work without advanced materials, high temperature materials, rugged materials. So we have a core competency in materials as well. And we also do some work in the biological sciences, the physical sciences especially, where we look at things that go along with propulsion, like flame behavior, but we do it in microgravity. And so it's an interesting portfolio, but it's a significant portfolio, and here's why. No aircraft, no spacecraft flies without propulsion, power, and communication. Cannot do it. You have to have something to push you through the air. You have to have power, because we all like to watch our TVs on the back of the screens on the airplane, and things have to be able to talk to each other in the air or in space. Propulsion, power, communications, which means that NASA Glenn, Cleveland, Ohio, is part of virtually every NASA mission. It's exciting for me. I get to kind of see everything going on at the agency, which is pretty cool. It's exciting for our people because they know that they are making an impact, and they feel that every day. So a little bit about our presence in Cleveland. A lot of you, when you fly in and out of Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, you see the big hangar over on the other side of the field. It's got the round roof and this big NASA logo right on top. And I can't tell you how many people see that and say, "Hey, NASA has a building here. I wonder what they do there. But that's actually only one building of more than 100 over there. Behind that hangar, we have 300 acres and about 100 buildings and nearly 3,000 people working there. About half of them are government civil servants. About half of them are on-site support contractors, near-site support contractors. But nearly 3,000 people they're working there, and a huge array of different kinds of facilities. We have 4 major wind tunnel complexes. We have a 500-foot hole in the ground that we call our zero G facility, but it's a microgravity research facility because it's a drop tower. It turns out microgravity is free fall, so we drop things there, and it creates a microgravity simulation here on the ground. We have vacuum chambers where we simulate the vacuum of space so that we can test systems like thrusters for spacecraft in a space environment. We've got an interesting chamber where you can create very high pressures and put in uh, caustic sort of atmosphere and gases to recreate the atmosphere from Venus, so that we can test things like instruments before we launch probes up to check out what the planet Venus is like. We have a simulated lunar surface, and the largest and most closely calibrated lunar surface at the agency, so that we can test rover tires. And we have a communications research complex that it's brand new. We just opened it last year, but it's brand new, state of the art, and does of course radio frequency communications, but laser comm, and even quantum communications and cognitive communication. So just and a ton more other things over there in that site. But in addition to our site right there next to Cleveland Hopkins Airport, if you go about 45 minutes west of us, we have another site near Sandusky called our Armstrong Test Facility. Many of you who have been around for a while might know that we used to call it the Plumbrook Station, but it's the Armstrong Test Facility. And there we have over 6,000 acres and some very large test facilities. Not as many facilities and not as many people to staff them, about 120 people total, including both civil servants and contractors, but some of the largest and most powerful chambers and facilities in the world, including the world's largest vacuum chamber, the world's highest capacity vibration shaker table, if you will, the world's most powerful acoustic chamber. And when you put all that together in one spot, plus a place where we can test electric aircraft propulsion systems at an altitude facility, it's a really interesting complex where you have some unique capabilities. But that's what we do here in little old Cleveland. We have all of this capability. Some people say, "Hey, the road to the moon goes through Ohio." Well, it absolutely does, because you can't fly without the things that we're doing at NASA Glenn. Now, one of the things when we're interacting and out with our community is, hey, what about economic development? And we're always a little bit careful to say, we're not an economic development agency. That's not our mission. Our mission is to break the surly bonds of the earth and get people to space or make air travel better for people. That's our mission. But it just so happens that if you're sitting here working in advanced technology, whether it's materials research or communications research, or building spacecraft power and aircraft power systems, you're going to have an economic impact. And we do measure that, and we talk about it because it is one of the things that we spin off. And so just here in Northeast Ohio, NASA Glenn's budget that we executed last year turned into about $1 billion. And of course, that goes out more than just Northeast Ohio. It's all over Ohio, all over the Midwest, and all over the nation. But just here in Northeast Ohio, that $1 billion investment turned into more than $1.8 billion of economic activity. And that comes through not only the direct investment in our people, but the investment that they then put into their communities, as well as co-investment that we get from companies who, many times, especially at NASA, we're a civil agency, we're not a military agency. So a lot of what we're doing is going into the private sector and going into commercial space companies and commercial aircraft companies. And when they see that, they want to invest as well, because then that that increases the impact of the work that we're able to do and helps to accelerate the work that we're able to do. And it's a great partnership model. But what that does is that multiplies and magnifies the economic impact. Of course, we generate jobs that way too. And just in Northeast Ohio, more than 8,300 jobs last year were generated from our investment. Now, granted, 3,000 or so were NASA employees and NASA contractors, but there's still more than 5,000 jobs that were external to the agency that were generated because of the economic impact that we have. And then another interesting thing about us is we actually have a very active technology transfer program. And one of the things we do is we have people inventing things. And when we invent things that may be strategically important to the agency or strategically important to the United States, we patent them. And so in our history, we've been granted more than 750 patents at NASA Glenn. Of course, patents have a life cycle and then they expire. But today we have more than 170 active patents that companies can license from us, and then they can use those patents and that intellectual property to turn it into products and services. What it does, though, is it promotes competition. It prevents one company from cornering a market in a strategic area. But we can work with and selectively patent and things like that, depending on commercialization and business plans and applications. All sorts of ways we can work with that. But we have multiple companies in Northeast Ohio who have built businesses off the patents that we've granted. And we have others that right now are moving to commercialization on several other patents that we've recently obtained. So it's a great story in terms of economic impact. But at the end of the day, our job is to make the world and to make life better for people by understanding our planet better and by making travel a little easier. And so a big part of what we do to do that is to tell that story. How are we making the world better? Inspiring people to be interested in space, inspiring people to be interested in aviation. And of course, that comes into things like STEM outreach and how we engage students across Northeast Ohio and across the Midwest and the country. A great example or a great opportunity we had last year that I'm sure many of you participated in. Well, you all got to participate in it at some level because at 3 o'clock in the afternoon it got dark, right? And but last April, almost a year ago, it'll be a year ago next week, we had a total solar eclipse. Incredibly rare that a total solar eclipse passes over your community. For us as an agency, even more rare that a total solar eclipse passes over a NASA community. But that's exactly what it did. And we're out there with our partners, Great Lakes Science Center, who hosts our visitor center. And we had a NASA village in front there, and we did a 3-day festival. And what a great opportunity. And tens of thousands of people came out and engaged directly with the agency, learned about what we did, and what an opportunity to look in a child's eyes and see inspiration and just the wow. And of course, when the eclipse happened, to look into a lot of adults' eyes too and see the same thing. But that's part of what we do because that inspiration motivates us. It motivates us to explore. It motivates us to achieve, and it motivates us to elevate ourselves, our nation, and our community to be better. And so when you come up and hopefully at some point you get to see NASA Glenn, our sign in the front. What we do is research and technology. And why do we do it? For the benefit of all. And so really happy to be with you here today. Just a little bit about the gym. I think it's a gym. I think it's a jewel, but I may be a little bit biased that we have right here in Cleveland. And so I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks so much.
Jimmy, thank you so much. So I'm just curious, were you one of those kids that was always interested in planes and spaceships? How did you get to where you are today?
How did I get there? Well, so I grew up in the Cold War. And I watched those goofy movies. You know, I watched Top Gun, but I was telling somebody last night I actually liked Iron Eagle better because I liked the Air Force jets better than the F-14s. I thought the F-14s were kind of big and clunky. Okay, but I wanted to fly fast jets, and I grew up in right outside of a very small town in South Georgia. Um, and we would have the jets fly over. There was a big lake and a big dam, and they would do exercises over there. So you'd see the jets fly over, and I wanted to do that. I watched the movies, I saw the jets flying the exercises. That's what I was going to do. Turns out when I was finishing high school, I was medically disqualified. So what do? You do the next best thing. I loved math. I love science. I love airplanes. I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. There you go. And I've always done that. I've made career decisions based on that. I was once offered an opportunity, and I had been working at the Pentagon in aerospace technology, and they said, and it wasn't a permanent job. And they said, well, do you want to stay? We'd like to keep you here permanently. And I said, do you have something in aerospace? And they said, no, not right now. And I said, well, then why don't you call me when you do? Because I'm an aerospace engineer for a reason, and that's what I'm going to do. But that's how I got into it. I saw the jets, and I wanted to fly them.
That's cool. And you mentioned the importance of STEM education. And can you talk a little bit about partnerships in Cleveland and ways that students can get involved with NASA?
Absolutely, and there are a few different ways. Our Office of STEM Engagement at Glenn is one of the most active in the agency, and so we are hosting some sort of an event with the school nearly every week. And so we have a lot of our local school systems are engaged with us already. You can go to nasa.gov and look for OSTEM, OSTEM, Office of STEM Engagement, and find us, and you can look and get details. Um, another thing that you'll notice, it's that like I mentioned, our visitor center is at the Science Center downtown, and that's been a great partnership for us, and I think a good partnership for them as well. And we work. It's an opportunity to engage, because in that visitor center we have NASA artifacts, we have places where you can go learn about some of our history, some of our missions. They have other exhibits come in that talk about things that we're doing now, and so it's a great way to engage. And as part of that, we work with the Science Center to offer several free days every year where students can come in and just have access. And whenever we offer those free days, we always have NASA people there to engage, just some of our subject matter experts to engage and be available and talk. And so that's another good channel. But those just a couple of ways we do that, but we're always working to try to figure out ways to improve our outreach. I guess one third one that I'll mention is that we have a speakers bureau. And so it's not unusual for our scientists and engineers to talk to high schools, to talk to middle schools, and they're out in their community and being part of their community. We live here, we work here, and we are part of this community, and the opportunity that we have to leverage that and be a part of the community while also supporting NASA's mission is just great.
Yeah. How does NASA's Glenn Research Center approach collaboration, either with other commercial organizations or other partners?
That's the name of the game for us. As a civil agency, our mission is achieved when industry can achieve the goals. And so collaboration is what we do. And there are multiple ways that we do that. Being out in the community, we talk to people, we engage with people, we'll host people on our site to talk about ideas. We visit other people. We're often invited to come out and visit, and we share what we're doing and we get ideas. But then you have to put it into reality. And there are multiple mechanisms that you can do to do that, because once you start doing real work, resources are involved, and you have to have a framework for that. But we have a really effective tool called a Space Act Agreement. And a Space Act Agreement is by definition a collaborative agreement. And we have a couple of different types. One is what we call a reimbursable Space Act Agreement. If an external entity, typically a company, wants to work with us, sometimes they want to test in our facilities. We have world-class wind tunnels, some large and very capable wind tunnels. We have other test facilities that are very capable and unique. Companies want to come and test. And often they come and they want to test, but they want to leverage our experts in what they're doing, because, of course, engineers are going to talk about the things that they do, because that's what engineers do. But people want to leverage the expertise. And so they'll come in and they'll ask us to do this work for them. And but because it's not core to our mission, we're a federal agency, we're funded by taxpayer dollars. If it's not strictly speaking part of our mission, then we won't spend taxpayer funds on it, but a company can fund us to do that through what we call a reimbursable Space Act agreement. So essentially, it's an agreement where the company funds our cost, and it's our people time, it's our facilities, consumables like power and water and things like that, and it works pretty well. Of course, that comes with intellectual property and how we're going to handle it, because we're a government agency. We have to keep people's intellectual property safe. There's a law that says that we have to do that. Um, and uh, okay. But the great thing about that is we're not we're not for profit. As a federal agency, we can't make a profit. So essentially, the companies only pay the costs. So that can be a very effective tool. Another way that we can do it, though, is if, hey, this is something that they're interested in, but we're also interested in it, then we can do a real collaboration using an instrument called a non-reimbursable Space Act agreement, which means that the company pays their costs, we pay our costs. And that way we're both working together, covering our own costs. At the end of the day, we share the data and we share the data rights. But essentially that way we can explore things together, and that's genuine collaboration where we all have skin in the game. There is a third type that we can do this, and we do this through different solicitation mechanisms. Of course, we fund people to do work that we want done on behalf of the agency. Sometimes we do that through contracts, and contracts are contracts. Okay, government agencies, we let contracts fine. But we have a tool called a funded Space Act agreement, where it is more of a collaboration. The industry is leaning in more toward government objectives, but there is some opportunity to work across the line a little bit. But we will fund industry through those instruments, and typically industry will cost share that because they're interested in collaborating, so they will pay some share as well. But that's a funded Space Act agreement. So we do have that tool that allows us to put a solid framework around it.
So when you're talking innovation, failure is certainly a part of that, and the changing environments is there, you're constantly having to navigate. Can you talk a little bit about how resiliency plays into your leadership and maybe point to any examples of that?
It has to, and we'll talk about failures in a couple of different lights. One of the things that is NASA Glenn is a research center where we are trying to push the boundaries and often pushing against the laws of physics. What you find sometimes is if you push hard enough on the laws of physics, they start to push back, and you break things. And I had a colleague of mine and a mentor who taught me, when you're doing research and advanced development sorts of things, the kinds of things that we often do at NASA, the only failure is a failure to learn. And to some extent, that's true. I mean, don't do something stupid. If it was stupid and preventable, then it was stupid and preventable. But but often it's about what you're learning from things. If you never have a failure, if you will, nothing ever breaks in the lab, things don't go wrong in an experiment or an analysis, a simulation, then you're probably not pushing hard enough. And so that's something that we're always trying to balance. Now, I will tell you that culturally, some of our engineers really struggle with the fact that the experiment didn't work out the way they thought. We had a case a couple of years ago where this guy had been working on something for a few years, and at the end of the day, he didn't prove it couldn't be done, but he did show that you probably didn't want to because it was going to take forever, cost a bajillion dollars, and it wasn't going to add that much value. But he really believed in it and wanted to see it go forward, but it was hard. It was a hard thing. But but I look at that and I say, but what he doesn't appreciate is how many billions of dollars of investment he saved us by figuring it out early. And so that was a smart failure. And so can we promote that is one of those things. Now, so resiliency is the ability to look at a failure from a positive light and say, what can I learn and how can I move on? Of course, there's also the challenges we have with funding, the challenges we have when we have facilities that break down on us. A lot of our facilities were built in the Cold War, and some were even built during World War II, and they're old. They break, and we have a hard time getting replacement parts. But we work through all of that. But sometimes things take longer, and the ability to continue to stay dedicated and focused on the mission is something that is hard to do. But I will tell you that our people are fantastic about it, and I'm actually amazed every day, and I take inspiration from them to keep me focused, because if they can stay dedicated and focused on the mission, then I can stay dedicated and focused on supporting them.
Yeah, it's a great lesson. What has NASA Glenn's role been with the Artemis program and the Gateway Lunar Station?
There are several things, actually. Remember, propulsion, power, communications. So Artemis 1, kind of the way that these things work for the non-engineer is you see the big rocket launch from the Cape. But sitting on top of that rocket is a little spacecraft. And that spacecraft is the point of the whole thing. You want to get that into space. And so you launch this big rocket, you release the spacecraft, and then the spacecraft goes off and flies the mission. And so for Artemis 1, we launched, and the spacecraft's called Orion. And so we launched, got Orion into space, and it went out around the moon, and was the first time a human-rated spacecraft had been to the moon since 1972. We've seen other things, but this is one that's going to carry people, and it's very analogous to the early Apollo missions as well. But that spacecraft needs power, it needs propulsion, and it needs communications. And so there's a module that clips onto, so the crew stays in a module. It's called the crew module. And then they've got another module that kind of connects to it that's called the service module, which provides the power, the propulsion, the communications. Think of it as the utilities, if you will. That service module, in the spirit of international collaboration, is being built by the Europeans. But the integration office that says requirements flow to the Europeans, verification, validation is right, and then providing the on-site support during launch and operations, we host the office that does that. And so we're providing, and we are providing actually some of the subsystems to their propulsion system on that as well. And so that's one thing that NASA Glenn is doing. Now that spacecraft, and by the way, we're looking to launch next spring. So in about a year, we're actually going to send human beings up to orbit the moon for the first time since 1972. So that's exciting, and that's coming up. Looking a little bit farther out, we want to establish a sustained and sustainable presence at the moon. And a part of that is a lunar space station. It's an orbiting platform where we can take supplies and people, and we can bring back samples and things like that. And that's going to fly around the moon. And of course, what's it going to need? It's going to need power. It's going to need propulsion. It's going to need communications. It's going to need the utilities. And NASA Glenn is developing a segment of it called the power and propulsion element. A company by Maxar is producing it, but the program office that is managing our contract with Maxar, as well as providing technical expertise and support for that, is based at Glenn, managing that effort. So that's our role in those two activities. We have some other roles. There's an upgrade coming to the big rocket in a few years because we have to launch bigger things. There's a stage adapter that allows us to put larger payloads at the top. We're building that stage adapter at Glenn, or we're managing the contract and the program and providing the technical oversight for that stage adapter. And so, like I say, a few different roles. We also are working on the communications network that will support it as well once it gets out in space. So quite a bit that we're doing at Glenn to support Artemis and Gateway and our whole Moon to Mars endeavor.
That's great. I feel like we could talk and ask you questions all day long, but you are very busy, and we appreciate so much the time that you did share with us today and letting us into this gem that we have right here in Cleveland. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you to the leadership Cleveland, the Cleveland Leadership Council for all you're doing to promote Cleveland and our leadership and our leaders in Cleveland. Thank you.